So I read a story about a little girl named Tess, who one day went to her secret hiding place and pulled out her jelly jar full of money. And she opened it up and she laid it out on the floor and she counted up the money. And she put it back in the jar and she took the jar with her to the local drugstore. And there she stood waiting for her turn, for the pharmacist to give her attention. He was spending a lot of time with this well-dressed man. And so she kind of shuffled in place, made some noise with her feet, but that didn't seem to work. And then she kind of cleared her throat. That didn't seem to work either. So then she took out one of the quarters from her little jar and she smacked it on the glass top of the counter. That got his attention. And with a bit of annoyance, he said to her, "So what do you want, little girl? Can't you tell that I'm talking with my brother who I haven't seen in ages?" And she returned the same kind of hostile voice. She said, "Well, I would like to talk to you about my brother. My brother's sick, and I'm here to buy a miracle." And the pharmacist said, toning it down a bit, "Well, I'm sorry, but we don't sell miracles here." And she said, "Well, I've got money, and I'm ready to pay for a miracle, right?" And he said, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." Well, that well-dressed man, he turned to her, and he stooped down, and he said, "Well, what kind of miracle does your brother need?" And she began to well up with tears. She said, "Mommy says he needs an operation, that he's got something growing in his head, and Daddy doesn't have money for the operation." He said, "How much money do you have?" And she said, $1.11. And he said, "What a coincidence. $1.11 is exactly the cost for a miracle for a little brother." And he took the jar from her and he said, "Would you take me to your house and let me meet your parents and let me see if I can help your brother?" Well, that well-dressed man who was the brother of the pharmacist happened to be a neurosurgeon. And he was able to perform the surgery at no cost except $1.11. And before long, the little brother was home and well, and one day they were all just kind of sitting together in their sense of wholeness and wellness, and the mother just spoke out loud, "Isn't it amazing that operation was indeed a miracle? Can you imagine how much it would have cost?" And little Tess said, "It cost $1.11. "What do you mean, what do you think it cost?" $1.11 and the desperate faith of a little girl. Now, I don't know if that story is true or not. I tried to do a little research on it. Probably isn't. But I know what desperation can do, right? And I know what the hope for a miracle can do. It can set the stage for the demonstration of a person's faith. Vance Havner said, "Holy desperation is the door to God's greatest blessings. Those who proved him best in the Scriptures were at the end of everything." And this is certainly the case in the stories of the two people that we're going to look at today in today's section from the Gospel of Mark. Both of these people were at the end of everything, and their desperate faith took them to Jesus. Today we'll complete this section of Mark that focuses on the miracles of Jesus that help us get a better view of who Jesus really is and what Jesus can do. Jesus is God in the flesh. And the miracles of this section show his power over nature and his power over a large demonic presence. And in today's section, we'll see that he heals someone with this long-term illness that had baffled doctors. And we'll see him defeat our greatest enemy, and that is death. So who is Jesus? He is the God who can overcome all of the dangers of the deep and all of the dangers of demons and disease and even death. But beyond his incomparable power, we also see his mercy and his gentleness and his love. Both the greatness of Jesus and the goodness of Jesus are on display in these two stories. So let's explore today's section like it's a play, kind of in 3 acts. All right? So act number 1, a desperate father's plea. When Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the sea. One of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, "My little daughter is dying. Come, lay your hands on her so that she can get well and live." So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd was following and pressing against him. So Mark reports that Jesus has again crossed back over the Sea of Galilee, right? He had gone over to the eastern shore, and now he's going back to the western shore. In Luke 8:40, Luke reports that the people welcomed him, for they had been waiting for him. So that large crowd he left on the western shore seemed to be waiting for him to come back. And when they did, they welcomed him. So here's this great contrast, right? He goes to the east side, and the people there ask him to leave. He returns to the west side, and they're happy to welcome him again. Mark then introduces us to a man named Jairus, who's a synagogue leader. That means he's a person who's important and respected in that Jewish community. But it must have been difficult for Jairus to go to Jesus for help. The Pharisees at this point in the ministry of Jesus had pretty well, stood in opposition to Jesus. And likely even the synagogue rulers were feeling the pressure to do the same and to follow suit. But if Jairus had any prejudices towards Jesus, they were overwhelmed or overcome by the desperate need of his own daughter. Jairus' daughter was dying. And he had surely heard the miracles Jesus could do. Maybe he'd even witnessed some of those miracles there in Capernaum when Jesus was there earlier. Luke tells us that this sick girl was his only daughter. That kind of adds to the emotion of it all, right? This is not just one of his kids. Oh, you got many kids, all right. No, this is his only daughter. And she's 12 years old. Mark dramatically describes Jairus' humility, right? And his desperation. He comes. He falls at his feet. And he earnestly pleads with him. We get one sentence, but I'm guessing it was longer than that, right? I'm sure he asked again and again, "Please, please, I need you. Please don't say no." Whatever. You can just picture the desperation there, right? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt that helpless, that much desperation, that you symbolically went running to the Lord and threw yourself down before God and pleaded desperately and earnestly? I'm guessing you've probably been there. And if you haven't, you will be someday. We must not miss the faith that Jairus expressed in Jesus' power. He believed that if Jesus would just come to his daughter and place his hands on his daughter, that she would be made well and that she would live. That's faith, right? And can you imagine the relief and the joy he must have felt when Jesus agreed to go with him? I mean, what were the odds of that, right? Surely he knew it was a long shot. He's going to go to Jesus. What if he can't even get to him? What if the crowd won't let him get to him, right? And Jesus could have said, "No, I can't leave the crowd. I'm busy here," right? But he went, and he got to him, and Jesus agreed to go with him. And once Jesus agreed to go with him, can you picture Jairus kind of dragging Jesus along, right? Making a way through the crowd, like, everybody get out of the way. We're in a hurry here. I can picture that. Act 2, a desperate woman's touch. Now, a woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years had endured much under many doctors. She had spent everything she had and was not helped at all. On the contrary, she became worse. Having heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothing. For she said, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be made well. Instantly, her flow of blood ceased, and she sensed in her body she was healed of her affliction. Doesn't your heart go out to this woman? What a desperate place, right? And all the women in this congregation can far better understand this woman's plight than any of us guys can. Because all of you ladies have suffered during that monthly period and that monthly flow. But can you imagine it not stopping at all? For 12 years? It's hard to imagine. And imagine how frustrating it was to her to have spent all her money on doctors and only gotten worse. She was in our day and age, there'd be a malpractice here or something, right? Incidentally, when Luke, the doctor, wrote his version of this story, he didn't mention anything about her spending all her money on the doctors. Doctors always have each other's backs, right? Yeah. Now, it's interesting, the Jewish Talmud, which isn't scripture, but is kind of a Jewish handbook of their teachings and practices, the Jewish Talmud has at least 11 cures for what was ailing this woman. Some of them were tonics that you would take. Others of them were just crazy superstition. One of them was you would carry the ashes of an ostrich egg in a cloth with you wherever you went. And it was a different cloth in the summer than it was in the winter. But I can imagine this woman has tried every single thing, right? Everything the Jewish Talmud taught, she's taken every tonic, she's carried every ostrich egg ashes, she's done, and she's gone to the doctors and she's spent all her money. And now, financially drained, emotionally exhausted, having suffered both physically discomfort and social humiliation caused by years of sickness. Her affliction made her ceremonially unclean, which meant she was excluded from the Jewish religious life. And she was also isolated from normal social interaction. This woman was beyond human help. She was helpless. And she was hopeless until she thought there may be one more hope. And his name is Jesus. Jesus' reputation as a healer had spread throughout Galilee, and it had reached this woman. And like Jairus, this woman was compelled to go to Jesus because of desperation, but also because of desperate faith. She believed Jesus had enough power that all she had to do was touch his clothing. You talk about faith, right? He had so much power that he didn't even have to know it was going from him for it to have its effect. This is the kind of faith she had. Where did she get that faith? I don't know. But her faith in Jesus immediately paid off, right? The second her finger touched his garment, she felt the flow of blood cease, and she knew she was well in an instant. Can you imagine the joy? The thanksgiving in that moment after 12 long years? Now, she had hoped that she could be healed without Jesus even noticing her, right? She was wrong. Mark tells us, immediately, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him, and he turned around in the crowd and he said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing against you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" But he was looking around to see who had done this. And the woman, with fear and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction." We can all understand the reaction of the disciples when Jesus says, "Who touched me?" Right? It's like, what are you, crazy? What do you mean who touched you? There's people all around you. Everybody's touching you. But Jesus knew this was a different touch, right? Right? Jesus could tell the difference between the touch of faith and the brush of fate. He knew the difference. Yeah, people were crowded around him, but not everybody was touching him or trying to touch him by faith, right? And so he stopped the parade. He demanded the person come forward, not only for her sake, but for the sake of the crowd around him. Jesus wanted her to know that her faith was rewarded and was rightly placed in him. And Jesus wanted the crowd to know, when they would later heal, that she was healed, that it had come because of faith in him. The woman wanted to hide, right? She wanted to escape, but Jesus was kind of speaking directly to her. And she felt compelled to come forward, admit to what she had done. And so with this fear and trembling, she comes in and she throws herself down before Jesus, just like Jairus had done, right? I'm sure she expected to be chastised. I'm guessing she feared that Jesus might remove her healing. If he had the power to give it, he had the power to take it away. And how relieved she must have been when the words out of Jesus' mouth were, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction." Don't you love how tenderly Jesus speaks to her? He says, "Daughter." This is the only time in the Gospels that we know Jesus used this word as he addressed someone. It's a familial, tender, affectionate kind of word, right? And notice that Jesus praised her for her faith and sent her off restored, both physically and socially. But he didn't say that it was her touch that had made her well, the touch of his garments. It wasn't the power in his garments. It wasn't some mysterious force in him. He wanted her to know that it was God's gracious gift because of her faith. And it isn't faith in faith, it's faith in Jesus. Surely everyone was happy about this interruption, right? And this woman receiving this healing, right? Everyone was happy about it, right? I don't think so. I don't think Jairus was very happy about this, right? I'm sure he was frustrated by this interruption. Jesus had agreed to go and heal his daughter, and they were on their way, and there was no time to lose. What this woman did interfered with his life-saving plan for his daughter, and yet the text doesn't say he said anything about it. When Jesus stopped and started looking for the person who had touched him, if I had been Jairus, I would have said, "Jesus, it doesn't matter who touched you. Let's just keep moving," right? "Remember, my daughter's dying. And remember, you said you'd go heal her. Let's go, let's go, let's go." Act 3. A desperate faith that maintains hope. Mark wrote, while they were still speaking, people came from the synagogue leader's house and said, "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?" When Jesus overheard what was said, he told the synagogue leader, "Don't be afraid. Only believe." Now, we don't know how long that interaction with the woman took, right? But it was long enough that while Jesus was speaking with the woman, these messengers came from Jairus' house with this terrible news. The daughter was dead, and there's no reason to bother the teacher anymore. And can you imagine in that moment how Jairus' heart must have sunk? He'd come with such desperation and then had such hope when Jesus agreed to go with him to heal his daughter. And then only to have this delay, which turned deadly. Jairus had believed that if Jesus came and touched his daughter, she could be made well. The people at Jairus' house assumed, and I'm guessing Jairus probably did as well, assumed that Jesus could help before death, but there was nothing he could do after she was dead. How ironic that the delay to restore one daughter resulted in the death of another daughter. But this tragedy wasn't outside of God's sovereign purpose. And the delay here resulted in even a greater miracle than had there been no delay. It's a little bit like Lazarus, you remember? Jesus delayed going there. And Martha and Mary were so upset, if you'd come quickly, But that delay led to an even greater miracle as well. When Jesus heard what the messengers told Jairus, he countered their conclusion with a very difficult command. Don't be afraid. And only believe. What do you mean, don't be afraid? I'm terrified. My daughter's dead. And only believe. Only believe what? What am I supposed to believe? That the messengers are wrong and she's really still alive? What does this mean? And I'm sure the whole way, and we don't know how long it was from where they were to Jairus' house, I'm sure he's thinking, what am I supposed to believe? Now, Luke gives us a little bit more of information. He added that Jesus added the promise, only believe, and she will be made well. That's still hard to believe, right? The experience of most everyone throughout the history of humankind is dead people stay dead. Maybe until the resurrection, if you believe in that. But dead people don't return to earthly physical life. That doesn't happen, right? But that's exactly what Jesus was encouraging Jairus to believe. And even though it was hard for him to believe it, he had no other hope, right? He had no one else for help. If anyone could help, it was Jesus. So Mark concluded the story, starting at verse 37. He did not let anyone accompany him except Peter, James, and John, James's brother. They came to the leader's house, and he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, but he put them all outside. He took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the place where the child was. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which translated means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk. She was 12 years old. At this, they were utterly astounded. Then he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this and told them to give her something to eat. Now, the Jewish customs around death and mourning are extensive and very explicit. There's lots of stuff. And the hiring of mourners was one of those things. And there were professional mourners who knew how to really get things riled up and going in an emotional direction. And so they had already arrived when Jesus got there, and they're doing their thing. And Jesus comes in and he says, "What are you doing? There's no need for this. She's not dead, but she's asleep." And they all ridiculed him, laughed at him, right? And so he just put them out of the house, right? Now, why did he say what he said? Perhaps he wanted to downplay the miracle, right? Or perhaps he was using it as a spiritual illustration that death is just sleep until the resurrection. Perhaps that's what he was doing. Now, only 5 people were allowed to accompany Jesus to witness the miracle, right? He took with him the inner 3, Peter, James, and John. And he took Jairus and his wife. That inner 3 would be the only ones who would go up on the mountain and see him transfigured later on, right? And they're the only ones who would go deeper into the garden with him the night before his crucifixion and to see his agony and pray with him. And then, as always is amazing to me about the biblical record is, without any kind of theatrics, Jesus just simply takes the little girl by her hand and says, "Get up." And she does. She immediately gets up. And can you put yourself with Jairus and his wife, right? You know, his wife has already been mourning before Jairus got back there. She saw she was dead. Jairus arrives with a little bit of hope, but hope in what, right? But in that instant, they go from grief and fear to joy and elation. And Mark says they were utterly astounded. What are they astounded about? Well, they're astonished because a minute ago she was dead, right? She's a corpse. She's white. She's lifeless. And then the next second, she's back to normal, fully alive and healthy. Mark says they were astounded. Who's the they? Jairus and his wife, and Peter, James, and John. They'd seen he had power to heal people. This is the first time they see he has power over even death. Who is this person, right? Now, I'm sure these folks were eager to go tell everybody about it. Wouldn't you want to tell everybody about it? But Jesus said, don't tell anyone. Why? Jesus needs to be able to control the speed of growth of his messianic expectation and also the speed of growth of his opposition. And so he needs to keep a lid on this thing. Now, she likely hadn't eaten in a while. She'd been sick for a while, right? And so with compassion and great practicality, Jesus said, give her some hamburger and fries, right? Give her something to eat. And they do, I'm sure. So what does God want us to learn from this? This is what's most important for us, right? What does he want us to learn from this section of Mark's gospel and from these two stories specifically? He wants us to understand who Jesus is and what Jesus can do. And so in the section of miracles, we get this better and bigger picture of who Jesus is and his power to bring restoration and healing. We see his power over nature, where he calms the storm. We see his power over a legion of demons, where he restores this man to his right thinking in his life, right? We see his power over disease. This woman who'd had this terrible bleeding for 12 years, she's given a restoration of her health and her community. And then most dramatically, we see this power over even death. The restoration of life to this dead girl. And this is a preview of the coming victory of Jesus, when he'll die on the cross and be placed in the tomb where he'll spend the 3 days. And on the third day, he'll come back to life. But ultimately, God wants us to conclude that Jesus is worthy of our faith and that all of us should put all of our trust in Jesus. Jairus and the woman with the issue of blood both had enough faith to seek Jesus for what they needed, and they were both rewarded for their faith. And the faith of these two people stand in stark contrast to the episodes before the stories and the episode after. So the episodes before the story, you've got the storm and the disciples who were afraid, right? And why didn't they trust in Jesus, right? And then they get over there to the east side and the people kick Jesus out. They don't want anything to do with them. And then you get these two stories of people of faith. The story after this that we'll get to next week, Lord willing, Jesus goes to his own hometown. And there he's rejected. There's no faith there. But in the middle we see the desperate faith of these two people who trusted in Jesus enough and were blessed by doing so. When we put our faith in Jesus, it doesn't mean that God will always rescue us from every danger or heal us from every sickness. But it does mean that when we trust in God, we trust in the one who holds the ultimate authority over everything, and that we need not fear anything because of that. We are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Romans 8:37. And Jesus is our only hope, both for here and for eternity. Whatever and whoever Jesus touches is blessed and changed. Isn't that beautiful? But nevertheless, believing in Jesus doesn't mean that we're going to be immune to the normal parts of life and death, or the normal pain and suffering that might come from the persecution of our faith. But by faith, we look forward to the time when God will usher in the new heaven and the new earth, when we will be with God forever. And at that time, God will take away all of our tears, right? Death will be no more. Disease and dying, it will be no more. No more grief and crying and pain. Those things will be gone forever. But that's for then. For now, we may have to face many of these things. In the meantime, we put our faith in Jesus, who does have the power to do anything, but we have to continue with the kind of faith that says, even if he doesn't. And that's that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego kind of faith, right? Where they were facing the fiery furnace and they declared, we believe our God can save us even from that furnace. That's the kind of faith we have in our God. God can do anything. But even if he doesn't, we're still going to put our trust in him and we're still going to obey him. That's the kind of faith that God rewards. God is pleased when our desperate faith says we will trust in him no matter what, even if God doesn't heal our diseases, even if God doesn't save our loved ones from death, even if God doesn't keep us from persecution or keep us from losing our job or our life. Let us trust in God's sovereignty and God's faithful provisions and plans. And as the song we'll sing in just a minute, 'tis so sweet to trust in Jesus